There are days I still wake up before sunrise and sit in the dark kitchen with my coffee, just thinking, not because I can't sleep. Because some stories are too heavy to carry only in dreams. My daughter's name is Renee. She was the kind of child who collected stray cats and drew pictures of houses she wanted to live in someday. Big front porches, flower boxes in the windows, a yard where her kids could run barefoot in the summer. She had her whole life mapped out in crayon when she was 8 years old. She didn't plan on Curtis Bowen. I need to back up, because before I tell you what happened to my family, you need to know where I was when it all came undone, and why I wasn't there to stop it sooner. I had my second stroke in the spring. Mild, the doctors called it. Mild is a word healthy people use to describe something that happens to someone else's body. For me, it meant the left side of my face went slack for 3 days. My words came out scrambled like a bad radio signal, and my son-in-law, Curtis, drove me to Meadowbrook Assisted Living in Decatur, Georgia. Sat across from the intake coordinator with that practiced, concerned look he'd been rehearsing, and told her I was no longer safe to live alone. I was 67 years old. I had spent 22 years driving an 18-wheeler across 43 states. I had never asked a single person for help that I didn't absolutely need. And there I was, sitting in a chair that smelled like disinfectant and somebody else's grief, watching Curtis sign paperwork with my name on it. He patted my hand before he left. "We'll visit every Sunday, Pop," he said. He visited twice. In 4 months. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Because I think, wherever you are, you've known someone like Curtis Bowen. And I think you'll understand why what happened next had to happen the way it did. My daughter Renee had married Curtis 6 years before the stroke. I didn't trust him from the first handshake, the kind of grip that's too firm, like a man trying to convince you of something before he said a word. But Renee was 31, and luminous and certain, and I had learned by then that a father who speaks too loud about his doubts just teaches his daughter to stop calling home. So I stayed quiet. The first time I noticed the bruises, she said she'd walked into the pantry door. The second time, she said she'd fallen at the gym. I didn't push. I should have pushed. That's the thing I carry, not the anger at Curtis, not even the shame of what I did later. It's those 2 conversations where I nodded and said, "Be careful, baby," and changed the subject. Renee had a daughter named Lily. 4 years old at the time I went into Meadowbrook. Curly red hair like her grandmother had before the years turned it silver. Lily used to call me Grandpa Lou. My name is Louie, but she couldn't quite land the whole thing when she first learned to talk, and it stuck the way things do with children. From Meadowbrook, I knew almost nothing of what was happening in that house on Birchwood Drive. Renee called every few days, voice too bright, talking too fast, filling every silence before I could ask the wrong question. But children don't know how to perform safety. Lily, when she got on the phone, just said, "Grandpa Lou, when are you coming home?" Not hello, not I miss you. When are you coming home? Like the answer was the only thing that mattered. 4 months in, my son Philip drove up from Savannah on a Tuesday without telling anyone he was coming. Philip is 10 years younger than Renee and built like the defensive end he used to be in high school. He walked into that facility with a face I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. Jaw set, eyes doing the slow sweep of the room that meant he was calculating something. "Dad," he said, sitting across from me, "I need you to look at me and tell me honestly, do you actually need to be here?" I looked at my hands for a moment. Steady. I'd been doing the hand exercises every morning, speech therapy twice a week, and my words had been clean for 2 months. "No," I said. "I don't." He nodded once. Then he said, "I went by Renee's house yesterday. She wouldn't open the door all the way. Kept it on the chain. Lily was crying somewhere in the back. And there were 2 vehicles in the driveway I didn't recognize. Same ones every time I've driven past this month. We sat with that for a minute. Curtis put me in here, Philip. I know he did. The plan wasn't complicated, but it had to be precise. Philip was too known. Curtis had memorized his face the way controlling men memorize every threat. But there was something Curtis had never fully understood about me and my son. We don't look like brothers. We look like the same man at different points in time. I've always been the heavier one, the one with more gray, more quiet in his face. Philip, at 57, still looks like he's 45 and just got off a job site. But the bone structure, the jaw line, the way we both hold our shoulders, our mother used to say if you put us in the same room with the lights half down, you'd lose track of which one was which. We didn't need to switch identities completely. We just needed one afternoon where Philip walked into Meadowbrook as a visitor, stayed until shift change, and I walked out in his jacket and his truck. The facility coordinator saw what she expected to see. A big man in a grey Carhartt jacket signing out after visiting hours. She'd seen him twice a month for 4 months. She waved without looking up. I drove to a gas station 3 miles away and changed into the spare clothes Philip had left in the cab. Jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots. I looked in the gas station mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like who I used to be. I drove past Birchwood Drive once before I parked. The house Renee and Curtis owned was a 4-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage and a lawn that Curtis always kept edge-perfect. The lawn of a man who needs something to control. The shutters were hunter green. Renee had picked those. There was a plastic tricycle tipped over in the driveway that nobody had bothered to stand back up. That tricycle told me everything I needed to know about the current state of that house. I didn't go to the front door. I went around the back, to the gate I had helped Curtis install the summer before my stroke, back when I still believed he was just difficult and not dangerous. I knew the latch. Lift and push left. Renee was in the backyard hanging laundry. She had her back to me. She was wearing long sleeves in July. Renee. She spun around and the basket hit the ground, clothes spilling across the grass. Her face did 3 things in about half a second. Shock, joy, and then a fear so fast she tried to bury it, but a father knows his child's face the way he knows his own breathing. Daddy. Her voice cracked on just that one word. You're not supposed to. How did you? Is he home? She shook her head. Not until 6. His mother and sister are coming at 5 though, Lily, napping. I picked up the laundry basket. Come sit with me, I said. I have some time. We sat on the back steps and she talked for 40 minutes straight, the way people talk when they've been silent too long and something finally breaks the dam. I didn't say much. I listened to all of it. The progression, the way it had shifted from words to shoves to what it was now. The night he came home from a poker game having lost money, he said they didn't have and took it out on her in the kitchen while Lily slept 15 feet away. The way his mother, a woman named Vera Bowen, would come over twice a week and look at the house with cold satisfaction, like she was inspecting a property she owned. The way Curtis's sister, Patrice, filmed everything Renee did with her phone, looking for something to report back. He told me if I tried to leave, he'd get full custody, Renee said. He said with your medical history, I have no family support. He said no judge would. Stop, I said. Not hard, just firm. He's wrong about all of it, but we'll deal with that part later. What I needed to know first was whether Vera and Patrice were truly who Renee described, because there is a difference between difficult in-laws and actively complicit ones. Everything my daughter told me in those 40 minutes confirmed they were the second kind. Vera Bowen had been telling Renee for 6 years that she was lucky someone wanted her, had been telling Lily, a 4-year-old, that she was spoiled and fresh-mouthed when Lily spoke up at the dinner table like any 4-year-old does, had taken Curtis's side in every argument, visible or otherwise, had a key to the house she used without notice, and on 2 occasions had stood in this very kitchen and watched Curtis scream in Renee's face without saying a single word. That's not a difficult mother-in-law. That's not a difficult mother-in-law. That's an accomplice. I told Renee I needed her to do something very specific. I told her not to tell Curtis she'd seen me. I told her to let me come in through the back when Vera and Patrice arrived, and just go about the evening as she normally would. I would be in the house. I would not do anything unless I had to. She looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 12, and I told her to trust me on something she couldn't see the full picture of yet. "Okay, Daddy," she said. I positioned myself in the small utility room off the kitchen before Vera arrived. The door had a 1/4-inch gap when pulled nearly shut. Enough. Vera Bowen let herself in through the front without knocking, which I had expected. She was a tall woman in her late 60s, the kind of lean that looks expensive but is actually just sustained contempt for comfort. She wore a blouse that was too formal for a Wednesday evening home visit, which told me she was performing something. Patrice came in behind her, younger, softer-faced than her mother, but with the same quality of watchfulness. The kind of person who takes mental notes on everything around her. "The yard looks a mess," Vera announced, setting her purse on the kitchen counter. Not "hello," not "how are you?" "The yard looks a mess." Renee was stirring something on the stove. "I've been meaning to get to it." "You've been meaning to get to a lot of things." Vera opened the refrigerator and stood there looking into it the way she owned the contents. "What's Curtis eating tonight? This?" "It's chicken stew. He likes it. He told me last week the food's been lacking." "A man works all day, Renee." I watched Renee's shoulders do that thing. The micro-collapse, just a millimeter of deflation that most people would miss. I had been looking for it my whole drive over. And there it was. Lily came padding out from the hallway in her socks, sleep-soft and blinking, that curly hair flattened on one side from the pillow. "Hi, Grandma Vera," she said. Vera looked at her. "You need a hairbrush." Lily's face did the thing children's faces do when an adult says something unkind. Not anger, just a quiet confusion, like a door she expected to open has stayed shut. She looked at her mother. Renee kept her eyes on the stove. Patrice had her phone out and was filming Lily without trying to hide it. No hello to the child, no acknowledgement. Just filming. "Put the phone away," I said. Everyone turned. I had opened the utility room door and stepped into the kitchen, and they were looking at me the way people look at something that shouldn't be there. The kind of surprise that has no practiced response, because no one had prepared for this particular variable. Vera recovered first. She was the kind of woman who was very good at recovering. "Who let you out?" she said, and she said it with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Nobody lets me do anything," I said. "I let myself." "You're not supposed to be here." Curtis said Curtis doesn't run my life, Vera. He just temporarily convinced a few people that he did. I walked to the kitchen table and pulled out a chair and sat down, deliberately slow, the way you sit down when you are in no hurry because you have nowhere to be taken from. "Now, put the phone away. Sit down." Patrice looked at her mother. I said, "Sit down," I repeated. Not loud, just clear. They sat. I talked to them for about 20 minutes about what Renee had told me, about the medical records Philip had quietly requested on my behalf. Documentation going back 2 years, consistent with what the ER had coded repeatedly as domestic incident. Patient declined to file report. About the neighbor across the street who'd called 911 8 months ago and then heard Renee tell the officers everything was fine and had never called again, but had been keeping a written log because she was 73 years old and had seen this movie before and knew enough to write things down. I told them I had documentation. I had witness statements. I had photographs because Renee had finally, 3 months ago, started doing what every advocate tells women to do, and taking pictures of herself in the bathroom at 2 a.m. with the door locked. Vera's performance started to crack somewhere around minute 12. "You can't prove." "I don't need to prove anything to you," I said. "I only need to prove it to a judge. And I have enough to do that." Patrice had gone completely quiet. I told them exactly what was going to happen. Renee was going to file for divorce. Georgia follows equitable distribution. The house would need to go through mediation, but with documented evidence of abuse. A family law attorney had already told Philip that Renee's position was strong. There was a legal aid organization in Atlanta that had agreed to take her case the moment she was ready. The ER records, the neighbor's log, and the photographs together constituted a pattern. Curtis would fight it. That was fine. We had time. He did not have nearly as much as he believed. And if you two— I looked at Vera, then Patrice— interfere with that process in any way. If you contact Renee's attorney, if you follow her, if you so much as send her one text message that reads as a threat, I will walk those same documents to the DeKalb County District Attorney's office and ask them a very specific question about whether knowingly allowing documented spousal abuse to continue with active presence and participation rises to the level of complicity. The word complicity is a specific word. I had looked it up. I had written it down and said it out loud to myself in the car that morning until it sounded like what I meant. Vera's face had gone the color of old dishwater. "You don't have anything that connects us to—" I have Patrice on video from Renee's phone on 3 separate occasions, filming my daughter immediately after Curtis had put his hands on her, not helping her, not calling anyone, filming her. I let that sit for a moment. A prosecutor might find that interesting. I don't actually know if that is enough to constitute legal complicity in Georgia. I am not a lawyer. But Vera Bowen didn't know what I knew and didn't know, and that was exactly the point. Curtis came home at 6:14. I know because I heard the garage door and looked at the kitchen clock. He walked in and stopped in the doorway between the garage and the kitchen, the way a man stops when the room is arranged differently than he left it. Vera and Patrice were still at the table. Renee was plating dinner. Lily was drawing at the coffee table in the living room. And I was sitting in the chair at the head of the kitchen table, which was Curtis's chair. I had chosen it deliberately. He looked at his mother. She didn't say anything. "What are you doing in my house?" he said. Not a question. The tone a man uses when he thinks volume and certainty will substitute for actual power. "Talking to your family," I said. "Sit down, Curtis." "I'm not going to sit down. I'm calling Meadowbrook." He pulled out his phone. "Go ahead," I said. "While you're doing that, ask them how long it takes for a facility to lose its operating license when a family member reports that an alert, competent adult with no current behavioral concerns was involuntarily placed under false representation of medical necessity." I had asked Philip's girlfriend, who is a registered nurse, exactly what the regulatory language was. I had written it down. That's called wrongful commitment. It carries civil liability. And the intake coordinator's notes from April, which my son requested last week under HIPAA on my behalf, are interesting reading. Curtis's thumb stopped on his phone screen. "Sit down," I said again, same tone as before. The same steady register I had used on Vera. "I'm only going to explain this once." He sat down. I told him what I had told his mother and sister. Slower this time, because I wanted him to understand every piece of it. The attorney. The documentation. The filing that Renee's attorney was prepared to submit at her signal. I told him that the question of where Lily would live during the divorce proceedings had been discussed, and that with documented evidence of domestic abuse in the home, the attorney was confident about temporary sole custody for Renee, pending the full hearing. He tried 4 different angles over the next 15 minutes. I've seen men do this, cycle through positions when the first one doesn't work. He tried dismissal. The records were overstated. Renee had always been clumsy and prone to drama. He tried conciliation. He had been under a lot of pressure. He was willing to go to counseling. They could work this out as a family. He tried leverage. If I pushed this, he would make the process as painful and expensive as possible, drag it out for years. She'd never see a dime. He tried, finally, a version of pity that I thought was the most honest thing he'd said all evening, his voice dropping and his eyes doing something that was almost a question, asking me if I understood how much he'd given up, how hard he'd worked, how unfair it was that this was all being taken away. I do understand those feelings in the abstract. I understand that people in pain sometimes cause pain, and that it is possible to be both the problem and genuinely suffering at the same time. I also understand that my daughter had been wearing long sleeves in July. Here is what's going to happen, I told him. This is not a negotiation. These are the facts. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Philip had printed it that morning, the name and phone number of the family law attorney at the top, and below it a very short list of what Curtis would and would not do pending the divorce filing. Voluntary departure from the marital home within 7 days. No contact with Renee outside of written communication through the attorney. Continued support of the household expenses for 60 days per Georgia Code, which his attorney would confirm when he consulted one. If you deviate from any of this, the district attorney's office gets a call. Curtis looked at his mother. Vera looked at her hands. Patrice had been silent for the last 45 minutes. Curtis took the sheet of paper. He didn't agree out loud, which was fine. He didn't need to. Agreement and compliance are different things, and I only needed the second one. He left the house on a Sunday, 9 days after that kitchen conversation. He packed 2 bags into the back of his truck while Renee sat inside with Lily, and I sat on the front porch in the chair that used to hold a hanging plant, drinking coffee. He stopped at the base of the porch steps on his way out. He looked up at me. "You know," he said, "I was good to her in the beginning." I was. "I know," I said, and I think I actually believed him. People are not usually monsters from the first moment. That's the thing that makes it complicated, and the thing that makes it survivable, and the thing no one talks about in these stories. "I lost my way," he said. "Yes," I said. "You did, and now she's going to find hers." He stood there for another moment, and then he walked to his truck and drove away. The divorce was finalized 11 months later. Georgia is a long state when it comes to these things, and Curtis's attorney did slow the process in the early stages, the way Curtis had promised he would. But the documentation held. The pattern was clear. Renee got the house, primary physical custody of Lily, and a support order that was structured and specific and had teeth. Vera Bowen never contacted Renee again. I don't know if that was the threat of the district attorney, or her son's defeat, or some private reckoning she arrived at in her own time. Some reckonings happen quietly, and you never get to see them. Patrice sent Renee a text message 8 months after the divorce was final that said only, "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." Renee didn't respond. That was her right. I moved back to Decatur, not back into Renee's house. She needed that space to be hers, and I needed to be close without being in the way. I found a 2-bedroom apartment 12 minutes from Birchwood Drive. Close enough that Lily can ride her bike there if Renee follows in the car. Lily still calls me Grandpa Lou. She is 6 now, and she has opinions about everything. Which cereal brand is superior, why dogs are smarter than people think, the correct order in which to eat the components of a meal. She talks the way she was born to talk, loud and certain and unafraid. That is what I was fighting for. Not the money, not the house, not the legal outcome. though those things mattered. I was fighting for the sound of a child who does not know to be afraid of her own voice. I think about what would have happened if Philip hadn't driven up from Savannah on that Tuesday. If I had sat in Meadowbrook for another 4 months, another 6, until the situation on Birchwood Drive had progressed past a point I don't want to put into words. The window I climbed through was narrow, and I was lucky to have a son who noticed it. Not everyone has that. I know that. I know that some of you listening tonight are in a house like my daughter's house, or have a mother, or a sister, or a friend who is, and the person who was supposed to come and sit on the back steps hasn't shown up yet. I want to tell you something directly, and I need you to hear it before I finish. The evidence you need is not as far away as you think. Your phone has a camera. Your county has a legal aid office. Most do, and most of them take domestic violence cases at no cost. The ER records exist. They can be requested. A neighbor who has witnessed things can write things down. None of these things are easy to do, and none of them require you to be ready to do everything at once. They just require you to start. I spent years being the father who nodded and changed the subject. I will carry that for the rest of my life, but I refuse to let it be the end of the story. For Renee or for anyone else who needed me to be the one who finally came through the back gate. I was a truck driver for 22 years. I have driven through ice storms in Montana and construction zones in New Jersey and traffic on the I-280 at 5 in the afternoon, which I maintain is its own category of danger. I have never been a man who gives up when the road gets bad. I just sometimes needed a reminder that the road was worth staying on. Here's what I have learned at 67 about the thing people call strength. It is not the absence of fear. It is not the willingness to raise your voice or your hands. Real strength is the patience to gather what you need before you move. It is the restraint to do the right thing in the right order. And it is the humility to admit that sometimes you cannot do it alone, that accepting your son's jacket and his truck keys is not weakness. It is love going in both directions. Take care of the people in your family who need you to show up. And if you're the one who needs someone to show up, say so. Say it clearly. Say it as many times as it takes. We almost lost each other, my daughter and I. The years inside that house on Birchwood Drive took things from her that she is still in the process of getting back. But she is getting them back. I see it every week. I see it in the way she stands in her own kitchen now. The way she talks. The way she laughs at things without checking first to see if it's allowed. She is getting herself back, and that, more than any verdict, more than any document or court date or legal outcome, is the justice I was fighting to restore. If this story made you think about someone in your own life, a daughter, a sister, a mother, a friend, share it with them tonight, and tell me in the comments, when was a time someone showed up for you when you needed it most? I read every single one. This is Voices of Uncle Henry. Thank you for being here with me. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in an abstract way, in the very specific, quiet way you think about things when you're sitting in an apartment 12 minutes from your daughter's house, drinking coffee before the sun comes up, and you can feel exactly how close you came to losing everything. Curtis didn't become who he became overnight. Neither did Vera. Neither, honestly, did I. The man who sat in Meadowbrook for 4 months and didn't fight hard enough, fast enough. That was a version of me that had gotten too comfortable with keeping the peace. I had confused not making noise with being wise. Those are not the same thing, and the difference cost my daughter years she will never get back. Here's what I've come to believe. The choices we make don't just affect the moment we make them. They travel. Curtis's choice to intimidate instead of respect, to control instead of love, that traveled all the way into Lily's eyes, into the way a 4-year-old learned to make herself small in a corner. Vera's choice to watch and say nothing, that traveled too, and my own choice. Years earlier, to nod and change the subject when I saw the first bruise. That one traveled further than I want to admit. None of that is destiny. None of it was fixed. Every single one of those choices could have gone differently. And if any one of them had, the story ends in a different place. That's the thing about cause and effects that people don't always sit with long enough. It runs in both directions. The harm travels forward. But so does the correction. Philip driving out from Savannah on a Tuesday without calling first. That traveled too. The neighbor across the street who wrote things down in a notebook for 8 months because she had seen it before and knew that records matter. That traveled. Renee, alone in a locked bathroom at 2 a.m, taking photographs she hoped she would never need, that traveled all the way into a courtroom and came out the other side as custody and a support order and a life she could actually live. What I want people to take from Louis and Renee's story is not that you need someone dramatic to swoop in and fix things. I was not dramatic. I sat at a kitchen table and talked. I used documentation and legal language and the patience I had spent 67 years building. The strength that mattered in that kitchen on Birchwood Drive was not physical. It was the discipline to gather what I needed before I moved. It was the intelligence to understand that a threat only works when the person making it knows exactly what they have. It was the persistence to not stop at the first obstacle. Not Meadowbrook, not Curtis's 4 arguments, not Vera's composed dismissal. Moral courage is quieter than people expect. It doesn't always look like standing up. Sometimes it looks like sitting down, very deliberately, in the chair at the head of someone else's table, and refusing to be moved. If you are watching this tonight and you are the one who needs someone to come through the back gate, please hear me when I say the resources exist. Legal aid officers exist. Documentation exists. Neighbors who have seen things and would write them down if you asked. They exist. The path out is longer and harder than anyone deserves, but it is there. And if you are the one who has been nodding and changing the subject, it is not too late to stop doing that. Renee is getting herself back. That is still, every single day, the most important thing I know.